Welcome to Small Spark Theory. This podcast is designed as a collection of thoughts, ideas, and practical tips on using marginal gains to help your agency new business endeavours. Small Spark Theory is created and hosted by me, Lucy Mann of Gunpowder Consulting. Welcome back to Small Spark Theory. This is part 2 of our Small Spark Theory live recording, which we did in partnership with YCN over at White City Place. In this episode, you'll be hearing a couple of references to Felix and Joanna. This is Felix Velarde and Joanna Brassett. If you want to know more about them, you can listen to episode 17, which is part 1 of Small Spark Theory Live. I am delighted to welcome our second guest of the evening, or our guest for our second episode of the evening. Sara Stark is the Head of Marketing and Creative at Dishoom. Now, we have had a brilliant response when we had a client perspective in our episode at the end of last year with Katie Patterson from Hammerson. We thought it was really important to not only be talking to experts with an agency point of view about new business and agency growth, but to really understand how clients feel about the way that agencies approach them and what they can do better and how they can make the relationships better. So I'm delighted to have Sara here with us today. For those of you that don't know that much about Dishoom, they are an amazing, amazing business. They are a multi-awarded restaurant group. I'll just read some of the accolades from the past few years. They won the Best Small Group by the Good Food Guide in 2017. They came in at number 36 in the Sunday Times Best Companies to Work For in 2017. They were the best restaurant in the UK as voted by Yelp users in 2015 and 2016. And they were voted the coolest UK restaurant by Cool Brands in 2016. Congratulations, Sara. And welcome to Small Spark Theory. It would be really useful for our audience and for the listeners if you could tell us a bit about your career up until now and your role at Dishoom.
Okay, well, thank you for having me tonight. So I've been at Dishoom since 2011, which is just after we opened the first Dishoom in 2010. So I've pretty much been there the whole time, not from the very beginning, but when I joined, you know, I was quite small and young, and the business is relatively small and young, so it's kind of like we've grown up together. We've now got 5 restaurants in London and 1 in Edinburgh, so 6 in total. We feed 45,000 guests a week, and we have a team of about 750 people. So the business has just changed dramatically the time I've been there. And we have already donated 4 million meals to charity. We donate a meal for every meal. For every guest that we serve, we donate a meal. So I'm really proud of that achievement being with Dishoom. And we've done lots of cool stuff on the side as well as running great restaurants. We've released a record. We've hosted a crazy immersive theatre production in the restaurant that we opened last year. So I've been part of that journey, and I've sort of headed up marketing, creative, and worked very closely with the whole leadership team, the business team, you know, over the past 6 years. That's kind of been my life, really. And before that, I worked at Cancer Research UK. I was there for about 2.5 years. I worked in the brand team, and we also managed creative resources. I think before I joined, they had an internal creative team, and due to sort of cuts and things, they'd outsourced all the creative. But we were very much responsible for managing the quality of the creative output of the whole of the charity and almost operating like an internal agency, advising on best practice and preferred suppliers and trying to encourage people to get the best out of their suppliers without rinsing them, which was an ongoing kind of journey. And prior to that, I worked in a Young and Rubicam agency for about a year, working on car brands, so Mazda, Ford and Land Rover were the brands the agency looked after. So I went from cars to cancer to curry in the space of about 4 years. So really, there's no pattern there.
And on both sides of the agency client divide.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. And I'm interested because obviously with, you know, Dishoom has grown from it's a dynamic brand, and certainly it's the kind of brand that I imagine agencies are falling over themselves to want to work with. So I imagine your you're in demand. There are lots of people that want to talk to you and try and sell their agency services to you. What have been the things that have really worked for you, either in terms of approaches or the way that agencies engage with you?
There's two different things there, isn't there? Right? So there's how to approach people and then how to maintain that relationship. I think in terms of approaches, I have to be honest and say that most of the, if not all of the agencies that I've worked with and, that I've brought on board in the time working for Dishoom have come through either word of mouth or recommendation or past relationships. And that has always been my sort of go-to is who do I know or who can I ask who knows somebody? And then, why do they look good? I do think that there is a space in terms of approaching people. I do get a lot of cold calls, like that's kind of natural, I think. The approaches that I listen to, the approaches that make me bother to reply or click through on an email are the ones where they've actually thought about what they're writing and they've made it personal. And I think in a way new business is a bit like social media, where if you approach it like a brand doing it, it's not very engaging. But if you approach it like a human who happens to be doing it for a brand, then suddenly you're just having a conversation. So it's like, oh, I don't know you, but, it's like an old friend or someone, like a friend of a friend, where you'd be like, oh, hey, I just seen this thing that you did and I thought it was really cool. And by the way, here's this thing that we've just done. And maybe there's some chance we should meet up, grab a coffee sometime, and keeping it really natural and friendly and relevant. The minute I feel like someone's pitching to me or, I don't know, just kind of it feels forced, then I'm not engaged. So the ones where I do respond and the ones where I do listen and sort of open the door is where it feels like they've really thought about it and they're approaching it in a very human way, because that to me indicates how they would approach working with me. Then in terms of kind of what of the agencies that I've worked with, how have they helped, how have we worked together and managed to build a relationship that's successful, that's either meant, a long-term ongoing commitment or, repeat business. We've gone back as and when we've needed them. I think from a client point of view, it is really important that you have to invest the time in the onboarding, the briefing, getting people to know what you're about and why you care about stuff and what makes you tick. I mean, Dishoom is such a specific brand. We're all about kind of Bombay and we're all about this very specific segment of Bombay and this very specific time period. And we have so much material and so much knowledge and so many reference points that it's actually impossible for an agency to just come in and know what to do and then regurgitate something to us that's fantastic. They really have to come with us on that journey. So we invest a lot of time in the briefing process and kind of building those relationships and making sure that they have the material, that they don't just come back to us and we're like, that's stupid. But then equally, they have to be able to listen and they have to also invest time in that as well. Because if we're going to commit to it and we're going to spend the time and we're going to provide all these materials and samples and explain why this is interesting and get excited about a picture and, bring out our brand guidelines, which is actually an old book from the 1930s in Bombay, then they have to invest in that and get excited about that too. And they have to really listen to us and not just, regurgitate kind of incredible India is what we call it. Archways and pink and elephants. No, just don't do that. So I think the relationships that we've built that have been successful are the ones where we've both invested time and effort up front. And that, I think, does need face-to-face. You have to find the time and make the time for face-to-face, whether that's onboarding, briefing, just meetings, feedback. If it's going to be difficult, get someone in, pick up the phone if you can't get them in. I always told my team now to, if you don't just send tricky feedback in an email, please don't do that. It's never going to come across the right way. Always pick up the phone, always explain yourself, always mitigate by, we might have done this wrong.
Wondering about the agencies that you have appointed. I know you said that usually it's word of mouth or it's people that you've worked with before that you think, oh, hang on, okay, who's going to be able to help? So either it's someone I know or I can ask someone I know who's going to be able to recommend somebody. And have you had situations where you're compiling a shortlist and then you're holding a pitch, or has it been just appointing somebody directly, or have you been in a situation where you've had a couple of different agencies, recommended or otherwise, that are kind of pitching for something?
I had a very good manager when I was at Cancer Research UK, and she was ex-agency, and she's the one who coached me in terms of a lot of agency management and how to manage that relationship. And she was always very negative about pitching. So actually, because we don't have huge projects with £100,000 budgets and kind of we're not giving out work for, it's generally tens of thousands, if that. So
yeah.
we haven't really gone through pitch processes apart from maybe the website, which was about 4 years ago. And, you know, when it's a big project where we're taking on a new agency, then we might think about getting some sort of pitch together. But it's not something that we have engaged in massively. It tends to be much more chemistry based. We'll meet someone or have a recommendation. We'll get them in, we'll look at their work, we'll just get a read from them on how they might approach things, and then we might just give them a project as a test.
Yeah.
Like, you know, just give them a small project and just sort of see how they get on with it, see how, like, we relate to them, what the quality of the work comes back with, like, how it feels, and sort of grow it more organically. We haven't done much competitive pitching.
I think that's pretty much the dream for for a lot of agencies, that scenario that you've just described. And in terms of the ongoing relationship, talk to me about some of the things that have worked really well from an agency perspective and some of the things that haven't worked so well.
Well, I think going back to what I was saying before about people that invest in the brief and really invest the time to understand things from our point of view, I think those are the projects that have worked really well, where they've sort of delved into the material. 'Cause we actually probably overbrief. We just give so much information. We're like, look at all these things and all this stuff about Bombay, but it's this very specific 1958 to 1959 and a half. But then we just overload information. And I think the people that sort of lap that up and are really excited to come in and read a book on 1940s typography with us are the ones that we're like, okay, you guys get it. And like, you're also taking photos of this and like wanting to Instagram it. So I think those are the ones where people really get into it, and where you can just sense a passion, you can sense an excitement and a sense of like genuine love for what you're doing. And it's not just, oh, this is, you know, I'm being briefed and I'm doing it, but where they're actually excited about it, and you can feel that coming through. I think there's probably lots of examples where things haven't worked so well. I think one of the big things for us is people pitching things at the right level, because we do work with lots of small agencies. We don't tend to work with any big agencies. It's interesting what Felix was saying before about you like to be in the you know, about the 75% mark, and that might be true. I think, yeah, we've definitely worked with agencies where they've overthought things, and then they've come, you know, you give them a brief, and for us it's like a fairly simple idea, and we probably already have a good idea of what we want, and then they come back with this enormous quote for however many concepts, and we're like, no, just do this thing, but do it really well. And so there's a sense of kind of reading what the client wants, and because we have a very strong view on our brand, and we actually creative direct the brand internally, and we hire specific agencies to do what we want, which I know for some agencies can be quite difficult because they want more freedom and to be able to own the idea and drive that. But being able to read the client and what they want and how much input and involvement they want in that brief is a really important thing. And if people have misread that and just run off with it and tried to treat it as if we're just some kind of marketing team who don't really want to have any input on the creative, then that's not right for us. I also think, you know, we've also worked with an agency where they were a really, really big agency, and they were doing some work with us pro bono, which was fantastic. But because we were very, very small at the time, it was just complete disconnect in terms of, there was just me. This is like years ago, and I was the only marketing person, and they would be like, the project manager would be ringing me like saying like, we need sign off on this right now, like right now, this minute. And I'm like, I'm in a meeting, and she's like, well, somebody else needs to do it. And I'm like, literally there is nobody else. Like, there's literally just me, and I can't do it right now, so it's going to have to wait. And there was quite a lot of disconnect and friction just because their team was enormous and ours was tiny, i.e. me, and both of our minds were boggled by that scenario. And I think if you take the time at the beginning to really invest in how the client works, and also telling them how you work and kind of what you want to get out of the relationship and what you need from the relationship, then that will pay dividends in the long run, because you will just know how to navigate those things before they become issues and not be chasing people for sign off at midnight. So,
aside from those things, do you think there are any other opportunities that you think agencies might be missing where they can make a few marginal gains?
Yeah, I prepared a few actually. Hopefully helpful. So one thing for me that I think is really important is about like the building that relationship and building trust. I mean, given how much time and effort we put into briefing our agencies and getting them on board, we don't want to have somebody who does one project and then we just don't go back. So for us, it is about really long term. You know, you want to build a relationship that's productive and successful, and where you both get something out of it. And for me, that the absolute, like, you know, the minimum for that is you have to have trust. So that for me means that you can't overpromise and underdeliver, which some agencies are really guilty of, unfortunately. And I think it's really important as a client that you know that your agency won't overpromise and then underdeliver, that they'll be honest about their ability to meet a brief. And then if you do need the work, or they think they can deliver the work but it's not necessarily in-house, then be honest about that and say, well, hey, we can't necessarily fit this in right now, but we've got these other guys who can, and we'll really help you with that, and we'll account manage. And if I'm giving a brief, I just want it done, and I don't really mind how it happens. So there's nothing to be ashamed of about outsourcing or bringing in a freelancer or some expertise that you don't have. Like, nobody expects that. I think certainly in my generation, in this day and age, everyone knows that everyone's working remotely and freelance, and it's not a big secret to have external people that you bring in, but be transparent about that, because I really hate being lied to. And I hate, I've had instances of agencies passing off work as their own, but then they'd actually outsourced it. And I just think, why? Just don't do that. You wouldn't trust a family member or a friend who behaved in that way, so you just shouldn't do that in work either. I think focusing on your strengths and taking the time to really define and articulate what those strengths are, and practicing your elevator pitch. So really zeroing in on what makes you special and why should we work with you, or what is it that you do really well. You don't need to be able to do everything, but you need to be able to do some things really well, and then people can opt in or opt out however they want. But there's really nothing bad about specialising, and in fact, if you study like marketing, the sort of traditional marketing theory, it's all about specialisation, it's all about differentiation. So trying to generalise and be everything to everyone is not a good strategy. I think you guys that do creative and like cool stuff, you have a lot of content of your own that you can share, and figuring out how you can add value to your clients is a really easy win. Whether that's like hosting events, workshops, showcasing work you've done for other clients, don't be afraid of that. Curating and sharing interesting content, whether that's your own or other people's. And then even like mentoring, coaching, job shadowing, sort of offering out kind of more training opportunities. Those like small touches and really not much time investment make a huge difference. And especially for more junior people who are just starting out. That happened to me when I was more junior, and I really valued those opportunities to go to an agency and see how it worked, or go and see a printer. And like, I love machines, and you'd go to a printer and they've got so many machines and they would tell you how it all works, and like my mind was just blown, and I still remember it. I still want to send those guys a Christmas card. It's great. So don't like underestimate how important those little touches are, and they really don't take much work. I think that's, for most people it's just kind of bringing together a few things that you've been doing anyway.
And I've seen this work really when agencies have done this really well as well, but helping training or mentoring or offering those kind of opportunities to see a bit of an inside workings of an agency for junior teams. They are tomorrow's clients.
Yeah, 100%.
They are tomorrow's commissioning clients, as you are the proof of that. So
yeah, and I think it's absolutely essential, actually, that I don't think you can be good at marketing without understanding what it's like to be in an agency.
Yeah.
I think it's very difficult, and vice versa. So I think it's in everyone's interest to learn about how the other half lives and try and bridge that divide and use that to your advantage. And things like sending a junior team member to go and shadow someone in a business that you work for a week, probably not a huge cost to the business, but you might learn some really cool stuff. And even if you don't, they're going to think it's brilliant, and that was their personal development opportunity of the year, and it's going to make them more loyal. So it's not a huge cost. I think, this sounds really obvious, but keeping in touch with people you've worked with in the past, whether on client or agency side, that is how I've built all my relationships with the agencies I work with now. Because you never know where people end up, and the people that you need to lean on when you are in a fix, which is generally when I'm like, oh my God, I need help. Who can I call? And then, I remember somebody, and it's those people where you've built that relationship and sort of invested the time, or just made sure that you're somehow still in contact. And we were talking before, and I said, there's a lovely agency called NB Studio, and we work with them at Cancer Research UK, and on my last day they sent me an amazing bouquet of flowers, and no one had ever sent me flowers before. So the fact that an agency did it just really blew my mind, and I still remember that, and I still talk to them. So it doesn't take much, but it's just such, it's those really high touch moments where you can go above and beyond what other people are doing. And then my last one, sorry, this is going on ages.
They're great tips, keep going.
Okay. This is one from Neil. He said, if you're a small agency with really competitive prices, so if you're a freelancer, or, you're not charging the big numbers that bigger agencies are charging. And just be open about your value proposition, your value for money, and why your prices might be lower. Don't be worried about seeming cheap in comparison, but tell people why you're cheaper and reassure them that you can deliver the same quality but for less money, because really that's what people want. And just emphasise the value addition without kind of worrying about undervaluing yourself because you're smaller.
Brilliant. They are fantastic tips. I'm wondering what piece of advice you've been given. We ask all of our guests at Small Spark Theory what piece of advice you've been given in your career that's really stuck with you.
I felt really bad that I couldn't think of a specific piece of advice because I know I've been given loads. But I think one thing as a sort of overall principle is that I've had the benefit of managers who gave me loads and loads of confidence and who really believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, to be honest. And they sort of pushed me beyond my boundaries and expected me and, kind of encouraged me to do things that I didn't think I could. And that for me has been, hugely beneficial in my career, and a great learning for me as well, is that when someone says they can't do something, doesn't mean they can't. And so that really helped me just to learn to just trust the creative process, trust the process in general, and my ability to deliver it and to bring in the right people at the right times when I needed them, which was pretty scary when you're a control freak. But I think it's okay to fail, and I think building a culture where you have the freedom to fail is also really important in a creative environment. So, if you can build that culture, first of all in yourself, but then within the organisation, then it will give you and your team the freedom to experiment, the freedom to be more creative, and ultimately that will open up doors as well.
I think that's a real Richard Branson thing as well, isn't it, about creating a culture where failure is okay. And I think I remember reading a quote of his where he said that if somebody fails and you fire them, then all of the learnings they get from failing, their next employer is going to benefit from that. Whereas if you keep them in the business, then you will benefit from the learnings that come from the failure, because it's through failing that you learn. So, interesting. I'm wondering if there's a book, a TED Talk, a film, or an inspiring person that you could recommend for our audience today and for our listeners.
Yeah, there is. I've done quite a bit of work with Robert Bean over the past few years. He is an absolutely fantastic guru of branding. And we, at Dishoom, we worked with him in 2013 to define really what was at the heart of Dishoom, and that kind of underpinned our brand positioning and the way we thought about, Dishoom and where we were going, and still does today. And we've worked with him on and off since then. And he's written a fantastic book called The 9.5 Rules of Branding, and he is, he's a brand guru who's been doing what he's been doing for 40 years. He worked, he helped BMW come up with the ultimate driving machine as their tagline, or BT, it's good to talk, but he doesn't come up with slogans. He really helps brands to get to the essence of what they do, and then instills that principle at the heart of the organisation so that your reputation, your culture and your products and services all align around this one principle, which is how you create a brand. And he's just a lovely guy. So if you ever get a chance to go and see him talk, or, he's got a great talk on YouTube that's been published, or his book's fantastic. So I think he's great. So. In
a bizarre coincidence, we were talking earlier, and back in the 90s when I was a new business telemarketer, Robert was actually my client, and he's so clever. I was slightly terrified of him because he is so clever, but a genuinely lovely man as well. So I'm thinking we might try and get him in there. Get him on an episode. Brilliant. So, Winning in Your Own Way by Robert Bean is Robert's book. We're going to be giving away a copy of that book with this episode. So, if listeners join in the conversation at Gunpowder Tweets using the hashtag SmallSparkTheory, we will pick a winner and send a copy of Sarah's recommended book. Now I'm going to hand over to the audience and see if there's anybody that has any questions for Sarah. Any agencies out there that your opportunity to ask. Alex, go ahead.
Hello, Alex Blythe from Red Setter. Thank you, Sarah. That was immensely interesting. Really useful tips there. I would be interested in hearing your view on agency case studies. How much attention do you pay to them, and what do you look for in them?
I'm not entirely sure what you mean. Can you explain? That's probably a bad sign.
Yeah.
That's quite telling in itself, isn't it, actually?
So there's the theory that when a brand is buying an agency, it buys the people and it buys their experience, it buys the work that they've done in the past.
Yeah.
Agencies spend a huge amount of time and effort crafting case studies, getting them to say just the right thing and use them in the right way.
Yeah.
And you don't look at them at all.
I don't think I've ever seen one, but maybe these are bigger agencies or different agencies than the ones I talk to.
Usually it looks something like, this is what we did for McDonald's. This was their brief, and this is what we did, and this was the outcome. That's a good case study, generally. Quite often they might not. They might just say, here's some pictures.
Yeah, okay, so I would call that a portfolio or
Okay,
a creds
great.
deck. I don't know if that's old school or something. I definitely would look at that stuff, but I guess it depends on how it's presented and what the context of that conversation is. And, someone just sends me here's what we did out of the blue. I'm like, whatever, I'm not reading that. But if, I happen to have started a conversation and it's been interesting and then they bring that in the course of that conversation, then it might seem okay, but I don't know, in isolation it's quite hard to say.
Any other questions?
Hello. You were referring to earlier about the conversation about talking to agencies that might be cheap. How does the conversation go with an agency that's more expensive, and how do you ascertain whether that agency that is the most expensive brings the value that you want or need, and how much kind of variation do you get when you're kind of talking to agencies sort of about their fee structure?
That's a really good question. I don't think, again, I'm sorry, I probably don't have a very good answer for this one. Definitely there's a range in my head of about what I should be paying, and I'm quite flexible in that. But I think really the only way to ascertain value is by doing a bit of work with someone, because you can't really tell how an agency is going to work with you from the work they've done for other people, certainly not when your brand is as specific as Dishoom's. So I can see all the work looks great and I'm really excited about it, but until you do a bit of work for me and I see what it's like to work with you and the quality you deliver and how you manage a project and how you think about things, it's really hard to say if that's good value or not. So we can only get so far in a conversation and then it's like, okay, this is kind of going well, let's try these guys out and see how it goes. And that's really when I'll understand if there's value or not. And, I would have no hesitation about paying more for good work and for a great relationship. So it's just delivering value for that.
Fabulous. Well, thanks, everybody. Thank you so much. If you could all give Sarah a round of applause. Thank you. Thanks very much to Sara Stark for taking part in our live event. Join us again next month when we'll be talking to Tony Walford from Green Square. You have been listening to Small Spark Theory, brought to you by Gunpowder Consulting. Join in the conversation on Twitter at Gunpowder Tweets, #SmallSparkTheory. The podcast is created and hosted by me, Lucy Mann. Our editor is Claire Aban and our producer is Isabel Jarvis. Music is provided by Juke Deck, available at jukedeck.com. For more information and to download further episodes, head to our blog at gunpowderconsulting.com. And if you like what you hear, head to iTunes and leave us a star.